sincere pleasure to have the former mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa, here with us today. You met Sam 2 mornings ago, yesterday morning. It's been a long week, right? On Dave White's panel yesterday, talking about the National Climate Assessment. And today we're combining, because we have these two gentlemen with us, a bit of the discussion about the relationship between how the state has to do what it has to do and the decisions need to be made in Sacramento, what that means for cities like Los Angeles. And Mayor Villaraigosa has a special insight into that, having done some work for Governor Newsom around infrastructure. So he's seen both sides, obviously spent a lot of time in the legislature. And so we're talking about decision making at both of these levels, which really matter to the 10 Across project, because we're intertwining, of course, the key cities along the 10 with the larger processes. The topic this morning, to some degree, although having known Mayor Villaraigosa for quite some time, it'll go where he wants it to go. I think Dave asked me, is the mayor here yet? And I said, oh, you'll know when he's here. But anyway, let's start with that. Mayor Villaraigosa, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Sam.
You know what I would say, first of all, 10 Across, we're here on, off the Highway 10. The last time when President Eisenhower, understood that if America was going to build the economy that it needed, coming out of the war, that we needed to build infrastructure, and we needed to build a highway system that could move people. Fast forward, really, since then, we've done almost nothing to really keep that infrastructure going and build on it in comparison to what we did back then.
And certainly couldn't push something through the House of Representatives the way that did, 9-1, that which seems like a miracle today, right?
Well, and so the pandemic, with all of its negative consequences, actually was a spur to get the economy, to get the politicians in D.C., and Biden particularly, because it was Biden who led that effort, to really make the kind of investments that we need. And in many ways, what we calculated, and initially I was told we were going to get a staff, but things being what they are, I ended up bringing a nonprofit, California Forward, and Boston Consulting, because I needed a staff. I wasn't going to put. I knew that the public expected something big from us. And so working with all of the general managers, secretaries, all of the secretaries, and we had a number of meetings early on. We decided to do a couple of things. One, what we said was, if we're going to build infrastructure, we got to, and if climate change is the biggest challenge facing humankind, then we got to treat it like an emergency. We can't just always dilly-dally the way we do in California. I'm not a big fan of what we've done in this state that's caused us to have the highest cost for building housing. We take longer to build infrastructure and cost more than virtually anywhere. And it was because there were simple things. And so one of the simple things I said was, if we could cap a lawsuit for a football stadium, SoFi, and a basketball arena, the Kings Arena, why wouldn't we cap lawsuits here so that we could build faster, still have vigorous environmental review? By the way, while I was mayor, #1 American city in reducing carbon emissions, #5 in the world. #5 in the world, brother. It wasn't Chicago. It wasn't Chicago, though I love Chicago, and I love Daly. But so finishing on that, so what we said was, let's cap them at 270 days so that we could build. Because I had gone through ARA when I was mayor, and when it took so long to build, the other party took our money away from us. And so we said, let's build faster. Second, what we said was, that we had to do, we're going to have to do alternative delivery methods. When Pete Wilson, if you remember, had the earthquake in 1994, the Northridge earthquake, From Robertson to, I think it was Fairfax, went down, the freeway went down. Anybody who knows anything about infrastructure, that would have been at least a couple of years. He did it in 2 months and 4 days with progressive design build. So what I said was, and if you remember Karma Heaven, oh no, all of you guys, people like David were saying it was going to be Carmageddon. And I said, not under my watch. Just kidding with you, David. And I said, not under my watch. We're going to do design build. We had to go to the legislature to get authority to do design build. I was former speaker, the mayor, and I only won by 1 vote, even though we made the case that it's going to allow us to build this freeway without the kind of interruptions that normally happen. So it was Karma Heaven.
Well, while we're on the topic.
The last third,
okay.
the third point that we focused on, because I think it's important, was I said, we got to streamline permitting. It's so difficult to build anything because every department, and there were 12 in LA that would tell you 12 different things. So the governor agreed to break down the silos, and that's why we met a lot to get everybody, on the same page in terms of, critical infrastructure and the like.
What was interesting when you mentioned the word interruptions, obviously we just had one here. Governor Newsom was down here walking beside the 10 with Mayor Bass. And I just wrote something about this. It's interesting. It's when our infrastructure suddenly is not working that we really notice it, right? There are hundreds of thousands of people out there on your highways in Los Angeles completely ignoring them until suddenly they're not there. And then you see the world that we're building and how fragile it is and whether it is contributing positively or negatively to climate change issues. So Sam, you're an urban planner, infrastructure. You know how the state's operating, you know cities. Talk about how you think about infrastructure of the future, what we need to be doing.
So, to the mayor's credit, I think the infrastructure of the future is we have to build it now and fast. I think that was one of the central issue when the governor started thinking about how do we take advantage of the funds to build the infrastructure we need. It's not about the planning and design, literally. It was really about getting it on the ground as quickly as possible. Relevant to fighting climate change, existential issues that we have. So when we started the process, the governor intentionally wanted to bring Mayor Villaraigosa because mayors and urban planners are the people who actually make things up and on the ground. They understand how to get things on the ground. And when that process started, he put an executive order to have a strike team that is made up of agency secretaries of infrastructure departments and said, I want you to, 1, make sure that things are coordinated across state agencies. 2, think outside the box in terms of innovation around how we take advantage of the infrastructure that is actually getting us ready for the future, for resiliency, for addressing a lot of the inequities. And that sort of jump-started our process. And then immediately he proposed the legislation to the mayor's point of judicial streamlining. And what that means is typically any infrastructure, major infrastructure, takes 3 to 5 years of litigation through CEQA, which is administered through my office. So the legislation SB 149 passed last year, and the first project out of that is the Sites Reservoir project, $5.2 billion project to capture overflow water from the Sacramento River and retain it so that this is water that is wasted otherwise. So they came in through, so my office administers that program. They came in 2 months ago, made the proposal, and we certified it. We recommended the governor certifies it. So what it means is if the governor certifies it, if there's any CEQA litigation, the California Environmental Quality Act, it has to be resolved within 270 days. That is significant benefits to any development. Instead of 3 to 5 years, you're saving significant amount of time and money. It's that kind of action. So yesterday, so once the governor certified it a month ago, it went to the legislature, and yesterday late afternoon, the legislature could concur or not with the governor. Just got the letter from the legislature yesterday around 5 o'clock, like they concurred. So this was the first of that action. Mayor, you'd be happy to know. It's a huge milestone for that project now. It's a $5.2 billion project can start moving forward. So what I say is it's not, the quality is important, but where we are today is we have to build fast and quick in order to address a lot of the challenges that we have. And to your point around the pandemic being the catalyst, in my studies of city planning and urban planning throughout history, the most incredible transformation and innovations have always come after major disasters. Whether it was the Great Fire of London, 1666, that really transformed the infrastructure of London, or the Chicago fire. Yeah. These are the most incredible moments and opportunities to actually make a lasting impact in the country here.
And that's true. And actually, this project, Tenacross, would not exist if, to some degree, Katrina hadn't happened. Because we sort of know that a city could catch fire or a city could be flooded or other things. It's really hard to act proactively, right? Yeah, it's not a problem today. Why are we spending all that money? So we have a disaster, then we fix things up. So when you're linking all of the departments together, which makes things more complex, but you're trying to move quickly, are you able to integrate the kind of thinking that says, what are the implications of what we're doing now for the future, for multiple generations forward? That's really hard work. Did you feel like you were able to achieve some of that as you're working in the State House? Excuse me, in the governor's office?
Yeah, so what is different now is, so, you know, I've been in planning for many years, and I worked for a mayor in Chicago for 10 years.
A great mayor.
A city known for the first comprehensive plan in the country had no patience for any planning. He just wanted to get things done. And Mayor, you and my boss, Governor Newsom, were all influenced by him. And the reason I'm bringing that is we, within state agencies, we're transforming cultures of the state organizations to think around, you know, the importance of getting things done. And so as we're coordinating across, so what we're trying to do is connecting the dots. It's not just building transportation. We need to align in place in time the transportation with an energy infrastructure so that it is close to where the significant amount of housing development are potentially proposed or job creation uses are proposed. So we need to be intentional that we coordinate across state agencies to make sure the benefits are significantly much more than any individual project. So that is where the focus of one of the focus of the strike team that the governor directed.
And Mayor, I've been with you on several occasions. I mean, you're the most people-oriented person I might know. Care about how things like infrastructure affects neighborhoods, communities, the people who are nearby these things, and how that can be improved. So when you were thinking about infrastructure, the folks that it was going to directly impact, how did you speak to that? Because a mayor has a different kind of job, right? You know people differently.
You oftentimes get described different ways. From time to time, I've been described as the Hello? Hey. From time to time, I've been described as the transportation mayor, though I've said could easily have been the environmental, the educational, or the public safety mayor. But with respect to transportation, I said, you know, we built 3 light rail lines and 1 busway in the 8 years I was mayor, and I said, people think that this is just about moving people in the car and, you know, with the single passenger automobile. But in fact, I said, I closed my eyes, and this was about reimagining what the city of LA could look like. You know, as you all know, well, maybe you don't all know, how many of you are from LA? So a few of you. So when I was a kid, when I was shining shoes on 7th and Broadway, we still had the streetcar. Right. We had a whole streetcar system in this town that got, you know, obliterated with the, you know, pressure from the rubber companies and the auto companies, and we became the center of freeways. and the center of sprawl. So what we wanted to do is reimagine what the city could look like with people working, living, and recreating close to where they work and close to transportation lines. And so we did the first transit-oriented district in the country. Why? Because we wanted to incentivize the building of housing along those. And what I called it, and it wasn't my word, it was something that Jerry Brown had said, we wanted elegant density, because LA is probably the worst city to build in. It's worse than San Francisco, it's worse than New York. They did this Proposition U years ago. We've never put a lot of effort in, our community plans and updating them and the like. And so we really made an effort to kind of, let's incentivize housing along transportation lines, create green space around those places. We did 656 acres of parks, which was twice what they had done the 12 years before me. But we did it in places that didn't have parks and along places where, they would have transit. So it's really about, I wasn't an urban planner. I know people like David who have focused on that over the years, but I brought a lot of brilliant urban planners around to kind of give us, the plan for how to do it.
As mayor, you are the head planner.
And downtown's a perfect example of it. But when I mentioned transportation, public safety, what I knew, nobody will come downtown if it's not safe. And so I made safety a big issue, a really big issue. And some people, I'm a very liberal guy, I'm against the death penalty. I was taking on criminal justice reform in the 80s and 90s when I was president of the ACLU, so I'm for all of that. But I tell people, if you're not safe, nobody's coming. And so we also made safety a key part of that.
Sam, looks like you wanted to add something there.
Yeah, so just going back to the people aspect of it, I think that's one thing that is also different in this time around investment. And California, I think more than any other place, is recognizing that and putting money where the policies need to be. So significant amount of investments are actually going parallel to the infrastructure investments. So give you an example, the organization that I chair, the Strategic Growth Council within my office, has invested almost $4 billion in the last few years, and 89% of that investment is directly on supporting infrastructure, technical assistance to disadvantaged communities throughout California. It's defined as less than 80% of area median. So we have been intentional in actually building that civic community infrastructure so that you connect the dots between, at the end of the day, the high-speed rail, the roadways, or the bike path is to transform lives and people. So we are intentional in the federal grants for IIJA that we put community infrastructure up and equal to built infrastructure. And so we've coordinated across that. So that is another sort of important recognition in transformation of urban planning or infrastructure
Which is
implementation.
what Justice 40 is about.
So our version, and the governor has sort of put our feet to the fire, that is just a starting point. Justice 50, Justice 60, Justice 70 is going to be sort of the California way, and that's what he wants to push us to do. And we are actually doing that on specific projects as we speak.
Before I put the plan together, and again, California Forward, Boston Consulting put the plan together, but I actually, in my first meeting, I went from the Oregon border to the Mexican border, met with, thousands well, probably tens of thousands, because when all the places I spoke at, of stakeholders up and down the state. And one of the things that really came through was this notion, Justice 40 was already something that the Biden administration had focused on. But I grew up in East LA, where we have 5 freeways. The South Side has 4. It's like that, Santa Monica Boulevard was supposed to be a freeway, everybody, but, rich people get to say no in a way that poor people don't. So when we talk about Justice 40, it's both affirmative and in the negative sense. Those projects that disproportionately impact communities of color and low-income communities, they're not going to be high on our priority list. And when we mitigate, we're going to mitigate like we do for Beverly Hills and West Hollywood, in East LA and South LA and Fresno and the like. And in that sense, that was something that came out because everything that we've done so far, and at some point I want to talk about what we need to do still, came out of our plan, which came out of meeting with, all these stakeholders up and down the state who said, hey, hold it, disproportionately, the poor communities of color get left behind here. And so the other thing that we did is something that we did in LA. When I first ran for mayor, I said, I'm going to make the crane the official bird of Los Angeles. And I was in South LA at a big church, and this tall construction guy, African American, walks up to me and he says, well, I'm saying this right, stands right over me at like 2 inches, and he's like 6', giant. He's a big old guy. Well, I'm not that big, so, anybody's a giant. But, and he walks right up to me and he says, why would I care about cranes if I don't see black people on construction sites? Well, I grew up on the east side, so I had to walk 2 inches closer to him, looked up to him and said, if you elect me, you will. So what did we do? And it's what we argued that we should do here. We said, let's identify because you can't, with the anti-affirmative action in this state, you can't address some of the past, consequences of a history of discrimination. So we said, let's identify high poverty, high unemployment census tracts, and we're going to recruit from those census tracts. So for the first time, when I first started going out on all my construction sites, I'd walk in and cameras all over, and I said, so where do you live? Temecula, Arizona, San Bernardino. I love all those places, especially when I ran for mayor, but, well, not Arizona, but I love those places. But I said, when I ran for governor, but I said to them, well, hold it. Why do we have all the, because that's where the skill was. So what we did was we identified high, unemployment and poverty census tracts, 2,500 African-American apprentices. We got women on, on construction sites. We got, I used to say formerly incarcerated, the word is justice served people on our construction sites. The Latinos, who everybody sees Latinos on construction sites, they were mostly laborers when I started. And I said, I want to see operating engineers. I want to see electricians. I want to see plumbers. I want to see everybody who voted for all the stuff that we did and who will benefit from it because revitalizing communities. So we were really focused on people.
Which makes sense relative to the topic of infrastructure, which particularly the 10, for example, did a lot of violence to neighborhoods. And so to link those two things up, the kind of justice you're speaking about and our building of our cities. But let's go to what you said about closing your eyes and imagining a different future. We hear about electrification and automation of transportation, but this has become more of a transportation discussion than I thought, but it's perfectly fine. That's going to change cities, and I'm thinking about you, Sam, as a planner, who has access to a car, which is often very expensive if it's running on electricity, not to mention the ability to recharge it wherever that is. So as you look forward in your positions that you're both holding about the future of the city and the changes you see, let's use transportation, how radically forward can we move things to really cause for a different city? When the 10 caught fire a few weeks ago, that was the headline from the LA Times editorial board. Maybe this is our chance to reimagine highways and whether we need to keep doing more of the same. Probably happens every time there's something of a disaster. How do you see LA and even California changing because of differences in transportation?
So I'll go back to where I started, which is this is the opportunity to really think not only outside the box, but outside a different kind of box. We have all the tools. Technology is advancing so fast. Now, my office is working on urban air mobility now to make sure that we have not only the infrastructure that can actually support that, because we can't stop it. It's coming. Very, short trips to make it easier to get from point A to point B. It has a lot of equity impact. So we're looking at that. What is the impact of urban air mobility in this small, eventually going to be autonomous, vertical flights, the Jetsons? That is going to be a reality. So as we think about the urban places and how those engage in our sort of built environment, we have to think now before trying to repair the wound 50 years from now. So we're doing that in my office now. We're working with the manufacturers as well as thinking about how do we transform the urban place. High-speed rail is going to be part of the future. Unfortunately, it's not new technology, but for America, it is a new technology, and I'm happy to report. Just yesterday, we got notice from the Biden administration that California is awarded $6 billion to complete our high-speed rail from LA to San Francisco and from Las Vegas to LA. $6 billion. That's going to transform California. That's going to transform LA. It will be the first high-speed rail at 220
I think we
miles
just got
an
some
hour.
planning money yesterday from Tucson to Phoenix for a rail, which
Yeah.
we've wanted for a long time. Planning money,
So
not building money.
all of those are going to help transform.
Starts with planning.
It does.
It does. So the key, I think, for us is how do we, so we've learned so many lessons from, highways being used to segregate neighborhoods and impact disadvantaged neighborhoods. How do we put the guardrails now? And that's what a lot of our plans that are in place, either the California Resources Board scoping plan, which lays out strategies, how do we achieve carbon neutrality, but it's step by step addressing climate, addressing future-proofing our state, and addressing equity. It is there in the plan, and what is again different this time is there is political alignment from the legislature to the governor. Two, we have a governor who's constantly pushing the limits that we not only just have that plan, but make sure it's funded and make sure it's monitored and evaluated from time to time. If we need to make course corrections, we will do. That is the kind of transformation for state agencies that needs to happen from that kind of leadership. And that's why I'm really excited about this time and moment that we have around transforming the state.
So you have alignment in this state, probably different views across the 10 different states about a number of these topics, but this is another chance for California to set the standard, right? I'm sure you're thinking that, as it has done for traffic, vehicles, transportation for a long time.
As it has done, I mean, this future starts here as often, and Ron talked about that about 1974. Yeah, this is a lab for that.
Yeah.
And if the, good, go ahead. So this is, I think we have to demonstrate proof of concept is critical. And in real time, we're actually doing that as we speak. So we are funding a $600 million California Jobs for All program that is really helping us transition to a just economy. And as we do that, we're funding pilot projects that these private entities can come up with creative solutions and ideas. And that we're using that to actually help inform our infrastructure investments.
And infrastructure isn't just transportation. In Arizona, California, those of us in the Southwest, we think, all of us, about water a lot. We're often using the same sources. Colorado River has come up here frequently, as well as the electrification of a number of things, and so that infrastructure and how we move power around. We've talked about both those issues on this stage. How about those elements in the future of California?
Part of why we talk so much about transportation, about 70% of this money is, the 110, and Boston Consulting has estimated that with the right leverage, like capping lawsuits, like alternative delivery methods, like streamlined permitting, like a TIFIA program, an infrastructure bank. One of the things that I said, this was the first, effort, but we got to do a lot more. You go to New Zealand, you go to Australia, you go to Canada, they use their pension funds to invest in their infrastructure. Historically, the little infrastructure we invest in, we do it out of state. And so one of the things that I've argued is this was a start, but we got to leverage more. So 70% is transportation. The rest is energy, water, and broadband, with broadband getting the least. But there are places, when Priscilla and I and the whole crew, the governor's office and the folks from California Forward, when we went up to the Oregon border, there's a 3-hour stretch, there's no internet. And, you're driving at 9 o'clock at night, and there are deer coming across you, like we almost hit a deer like multiple times. And at the end of the day, there's, as you said, there's more than just transportation. Energy is going to be important because we were also responsible for the Inflation Reduction Act as well, and the energy projects that go with that. But one of the things, again, equity, and not just, climate change is important, but so is environmental justice, everybody. We focused a lot, and we should, on the electrification, like, charging stations. But we also got to focus on cleaning up the air, the carcinogens in the air, and the like. And the water projects. Something you have to understand. In this state, you read about Flint, Michigan. You read about Jackson, Mississippi. We have both those places in Riverside, in Fresno County, in San Jacinto. There are too many people in this state, not us. So, it's not an issue for us, but an issue for them. And so in terms of Justice 40 and equity and inclusion, what I argued, and, we've got to make sure there's alignment up and down the state on, we've got to make those places high priorities because, there are a lot of water needs. And by the way, the Sykes thing, just so you know, we first started talking about it when I was Speaker of the Assembly. And the Dems, love them. We said we'll do two dams. And then we reneged on the deal, never gave it to them, to the Republicans. And they were important to do. Because what happens is we're against dams, too many people on my side of the ledger, but then also against the, addressing the underwater aquifers that we have that we got to clean up and address. So there's a balance that we realized and that we argued for when we made these recommendations. Hey, there's a lot of things that we need to do with respect to really building the infrastructure in a way that lifts up communities.
Right. I'm sure there's some questions percolating in the audience, and I hope you will come to a mic and ask them. I'll ask one last.
David always has a question.
Yeah, David, that would be great.
David's never been shot.
One last question. You're both representing political institutions here, state level, city level, formally in the state level. We had Ron Brownstein on this stage a couple nights ago talking about where we are as a country. California's a special place in that regard. It's a unique place on the 10 relative to your friends in Texas and Florida who see the world a little bit differently. And this could be a long answer and probably a whole seminar for a day, but your confidence in our ability to overcome some of what's going on there by virtue of what California can do to say, this can be done. We can bring people together. What would you say about that?
I think we have a lot of work to do there. In that, what I mean by that is, and I talked to Ron the next day as well, and it's daunting, the chasm that exists between blue and red states. But as Californians, we actually have to make extra efforts to actually understand the other. And what do I mean by that? We're always, in good company often, and we all believe in science, and we march along those paths. But we know half the population probably is on the other side. We need to get down to understand what that means and how is this relevant to them what we're doing here. And an example I'll give you, and I was telling somebody the other day, we fund solar weatherization program for homes. We're in Watts Rising, our office sort of supported programs. As we were walking there, this woman, about 80, 85, said, hey, I took a bunch of my state secretary agencies for a walk tour to look at it. She invited us in her house to show us how her life has been transformed by a very simple weatherization program that we funded. And she showed us where the LED lights are, where the solar panel, and how much it's saving her a month, and how her life has changed. Until we get to that individual level and understand each, how this is impacting them and how it's benefiting them, we're not going to transform people. So we have to do an extra work, and our office has now a new Office of Community Partnership and Strategic Communication that the governor established in my office last year. Their charge is to engage. Now they've signed contracts with 120 community-based organizations that are on the ground with 40 different languages, so that we use that venue to really engage people we don't normally engage with. We don't ask their politics, and some of them could be blue or red, but they are in the rural areas that we don't normally engage with. So we're engaging with them on extreme heat issues, on Save Our Water campaign. And we're already seeing results just in the last few months, how that is changing the conversation and the discourse.
You want to weigh in on this very quickly before we get to the questions? Or you want to save that?
I'll save it since you said very quickly.
Yeah, but we do want to hear what you have to say.
Well, what I would say is, just real quickly, I believe you could be progressive and be a uniter. I don't think we have to be screaming at one another the way we do. I went, we talked about poverty, in those towns up north by the Oregon border, 70% poverty and 75% white. So the poverty in this state is mostly very conservative. But when you listen to them, you realize their aspirations aren't any different from people in other places in the state. And I honestly believe that we need to work a lot better to bring people together so that we can move forward as a state.